Good morning, folks. I am Sarah O'Brien. Welcome to another edition of the Healing Hour on this pre-Independence Day. Oh, look, I forgot to light up my little sun. Today is July 3rd, 2025, and it is the day before Independence Day. I've heard many things from folks. Being a psychotherapist, they do not want to celebrate America this year, but for many, many reasons, I will always do that, particularly the people that fight and die for things like our independence. And so I am here being festive today with my American wear. Happy Independence Day. Or one day early, to my fellow Americans. I think that includes you, Leanna. Good morning. I'm pretty sure she's in the US of A, but I can't remember where she said she was. Minnesota? Where are you, Leanna? Remind me. If you're here, let me know you're here so I can give you a shout out. Good morning, Rashida. Good morning. I'm so happy to see you. Where are you in the world or in the US? Let us know. Today, we are going to be talking about the neuroscience of anxiety, or neuroscience and anxiety, however you want to think about it. I'm going to sort of describe anxiety to you guys and some treatments for anxiety from a neuroscience perspective. This is how I treat in my practice. If you guys saw my comments earlier, this is 100% my wheelhouse. I could probably talk about this stuff in my sleep. I bring to you lots of other healing topics, lots of other leadership topics, and the month of July is going to bring mental health topics, including addiction and trauma, and all related from a neuroscience perspective, as this is how I practice with adult clients. So that will be what we are talking about today, and I'll get into my slide deck in just a minute. Before that, let me do some announcements. I'm not super all over the place today. I had time to do my normal morning routine, which is like kind of a slow wake up when I wake up, which today was about 8:30 a.m. I slept like a solid 10 hours last night, must have needed it. Kind of a slow get up to my morning, and then walking my dog like usual for 2 miles in this humid and ridiculous heat that we have here in Virginia, but it's definitely better to do it in the morning. So got that out of the way, got cleaned up and like ready to go, protein shake down, right? Coffee ready, and plenty of time to like sit here for a few minutes before I am running into this podcast. So I'm a little bit more calm today. Rashida's got some new Philly. Yes, I love Philly. I'm down here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm not too far, Rashida. Home of Boys to Men. Woo woo. Love me some Boys to Men. Have always been a huge fan of Boys to Men. I remember getting their Greatest Hits album sometime when I was in high school as a gift, and it was a fantastic gift. Thank you for letting me know where you are, Rashida. Love Philadelphia. I've been there a few times, the city of brotherly love, right? Seen some cool stuff there. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so that's sort of the start to my morning. So that's sort of my check-in. Let me also say the Healing Hour podcast is sponsored by Andrew Stout and the Let's Be Diverse podcast. Andrew Stout, former HR employee turned connecting consultant for folks getting speaking deals. And so check out his stuff for that. Check out his podcast for leadership and HR topics on the importance and benefits of being diverse and inclusive, and how maybe we operationalize that to some degree. That's also a lot of what I talk about. So stay tuned. There's some stuff coming up with the award-winning National Affinity Group I'm a part of. I'm a subject matter expert for Integrate Trauma-Informed Network, and they're having live cohort trainings for their leadership certification coming up in August. I will be facilitating some of those live trainings, so stay tuned. I'll be posting about it and reposting Integrate's thing so you can jump on and get certified in trauma-informed leadership, basically. This group does it better than anybody I've ever seen, because not only do we educate and train and teach others about it, but we practice this within our expert community when we work on projects just like this and facilitating a live cohort. And we use trauma-informed skills and principles in all of our business partnerships and collaborations. And it really is the most peaceful way to do like independent contract business with other independent contract businesses. So we're all individuals, we're all entrepreneurs, everybody has their own business, and we all collaborate and work together. And it is really seamless and peaceful and easy to do the work and work together, because we all come from these principles and we operationalize it within our group. So stay tuned for some stuff coming up with that. Next week, there won't be a show, but I'm probably going to pop on live a little bit after my normal show time, because I have a client during my show time next week. But I'm going to be in New York City promoting the third anthology that I've co-authored, entitled Stories of Friends and Family Lost. I'm going to be there with the other co-authors. I talked about my brother. I'll talk about him again at the end of the show. And so you guys might catch me live from somewhere in New York City next Thursday, because there's some exciting stuff happen. So I won't have a show, but stay tuned. I will be here and I will check in with you guys. Okay, let's take our 3 deep breaths and then we'll get into our slide deck. A lot of content today, guys. So let me know if you have questions. I'll do my best to answer your questions along the way, but I also don't want to get sidetracked from trying to give you guys this very good information about anxiety and how it works in our brain. So if you want to get grounded with me, take 3 deep breaths in through your nose, out through your mouth. Really try to elongate that exhale. We are going to talk today about why this is something that I do and something that is useful for our bodies, minds, and nervous system. So here we go. Breath number 1. And out slowly. Breathe in again. Out slowly. And breath number 3. Out slowly. Okay, let me get my slide deck on here. Today, we're talking about neuroscience. What do we know about it? And what do we know about anxiety disorders from a neuroscience perspective? That's what we're going to be talking about today. How does neuroscience inform treatment for anxiety? Again, guys, I'm talking about this because I think it's good information for folks, whether or not you have anxiety. If you know somebody with anxiety, this could be helpful for you. If you are a people worker at all, like I don't care if you're a therapist or a coach or a nurse or an HR representative or a team lead, this is probably useful information for you, because I can guarantee that somebody in your sphere has anxiety. It's really prevalent, and it can be helpful for you to understand that this is how it works. Again, I offer lots of information on topics on this show that inform healing from a very well-rounded perspective, culturally, socially, physically, mentally, relationally, emotionally, all of those things. And this is part of it. The more we can know about these things, the less we can take them personally when we see other people have difficulty with this or end up being challenging for us in our environment because of anxiety or something else going on. And so the more that we can know about it, the less personal we can take things and the more trauma informed we can be. And so that is the purpose of all my topics. This happens to be one of my specialties. And I have a specialty certification in treating anxiety disorders. This is mostly what I treat in my practice, and I relate with anxiety. I myself am diagnosed with OCD. have a lot of general anxiety about things. And I feel so much for my clients and anybody experiencing this, as well as myself. It's really not comfortable. I love the neuroscience of this. I'm a huge neuroscience nerd geek when it comes to this stuff because it explains so much. And for anybody that's ever followed my content or watched my show, you know I like explaining things. I like to educate. I like people to understand. I like to explain things in a way that people understand. And so when I get it, I want to pass it forward. Okay. So we're going to be talking about the brain, our experience of anxiety, examples of what that looks like, and interventions. So we're going to start with a little neuroscience 101 and what brain parts are involved. Guys, this is a very rudimentary, elementary explanation of the brain parts and neuroscience. I am in no way a neuroscientist. I do not have a neuroscience degree. I love neuroscience. I have learned it a lot for the areas in which I treat individuals in my psychotherapy practice. It is very useful for that. I have very specific continuing education and certification training in these things as a psychotherapist and part of my license of clinical social work. So understand that I use these things clinically, but from an explanation standpoint, this is going to be very rudimentary. So if you're like high science and high neuroscience, this is going to be like a children's book for you. But if you know nothing about it, this is going to be really helpful. Okay, so know that going in. So parts of the brain that we're going to be talking about are the amygdala, the thalamus, and the cortex, and how they are involved in anxiety. The amygdala is a primitive part of the brain. It is way back here in what they call the limbic system, or the reptilian part of the brain. This is one of the oldest parts of the mammal brain. Everyone with a brain has an amygdala. And humans are just more developed and from that. So this is the primitive part of our brain, but it's very important. It recognizes safety cues, assesses the environment for signs of change, receives sensory information, and receives it first before any other part of the brain. This has been called the smoke detector, of your brain, of your system. Morning, Andrew. Happy to see you. Glad that you could join us. We are talking about the parts of the brain. The thalamus sends sensory information to the correct location in the cortex so they can be processed, and or sends information to the amygdala so it can be processed. So the thalamus is like the telephone wires, basically. It is the means in which information is sent. And the cortex turns information into cognitive representations of the meaning of the sensory stimuli. It makes sense of information and puts it into words. This is how we get thoughts. The cortex is up here in the front. This is the most actualized and the most developed part of the human brain. It's the thing that makes us human. The amygdala is what makes us alive, basically, and keeps us in survival, and says that we have a brain. And the cortex, and being able to turn things into thoughts, into thinking, into representations, is part of what makes us high-level mammals and humans. A little bit more about the parts of the brain. So I was giving you some basics. These are some basics. The amygdala recognizes safety cues, assesses the environment via the sensory information that comes to the brain, the smoke detector. The thalamus is the connector of the information, basically the wires, and the cortex is how we think about things. Okay, next up, excuse me. The amygdala doesn't respond to reasoning or to anything from cortex responses to stimuli. So the amygdala doesn't respond to thinking. It doesn't respond to what you think about something. It doesn't respond to a representation put into words or ideas like the cortex does. The amygdala does not respond to anything like that. There's no thinking here. There is only receiving the signal from the stimulus, from the environment, either internal or external environment, and responding. It's only receiving the signal and responding with either danger or safety. So the amygdala it has like one mode. It assesses information and says we're safe or we're not safe. That's what it does. And it creates emotions in us based on feeling safe or unsafe. based on the sensory information that the amygdala gets. The thalamus can send information to the amygdala and or to the cortex, and likely to both when we're feeling anxious. However, information is received faster by the amygdala. And like I was saying before, the thalamus is what directs and transport where the signal goes. So you could be receiving sensory information. The thalamus is going to send it up both to the amygdala and to the cortex. It's just going to hit the amygdala first. So before we can even think about what's going on, your amygdala is going to receive the signal and respond with either danger or safe. And that signal is like passed through the body and up and through the parts of the brain via the thalamus, and that directs where it's going to go. The cortex is something that can be changed via psychoeducation. This is learning, words, understanding, but the amygdala cannot be changed based on information that we take in through the cortex, through understanding. That is not how we change the brain in terms of the amygdala function. That is how we would change the brain in terms of the cortex function when it comes to anxiety. Now, this will make more sense as I move through this, but if you have questions, let me know. The cortex applies the meaning we assign to anxious stimuli that activates the amygdala. So the amygdala is hit first, safe or danger. And then depending on what it tells us, our brain like thinks about that and puts words to it. That's in the cortex. So we can't actually feel emotions without the cortex and being able to describe things, but the cortex can't actually create emotions. That happens in the amygdala. As you can see, the brain is complicated. We are only talking about 3 parts of the brain here and basically how they receive information for anxiety. And I think you can already see that like we get these layered things. The brain is very complicated. We know more than we did 20 years ago, but we don't know as much as we could, or all of it. You know, there's still a lot we don't know about how the brain works. Okay. So a couple other final pieces about the parts of the brain. The amygdala fires on its own without premeditation. Like I was saying, without thinking. We don't have to think to say, hey, this is danger or this is safe. The amygdala does that all by itself, kind of like breathing. We don't have to think about breathing. You know, you don't have to think about beating your heart. These all things just happen physiologically. That's the same with the amygdala. It fires this, things are safe or things are not safe without any thinking involved. And we need our amygdala to do this for our very survival. Reacting to something instinctually, overthinking about what to do in a dangerous situation is what helps us survive. If we have to stop and think about running from a tiger attacking us, we are going to get eaten. So the amygdala is the thing that fires. It says, run right now. And off you go. You don't have time to stop and think about it. Later, you might think about how scary that was and how great it was that you got away. But if you stop to think about that before, you're probably not going to make it away. So the amygdala is very necessary for our survival. And our amygdala requires experience to learn, right? And so this could be, learning in your primitive village that so-and-so got eaten by a tiger because they didn't get away fast enough, right? In addition to other experiences like you running away from the tiger. The amygdala learns that is danger and that we need to do something, okay? So our experiences in life also impact the amygdala firing at certain things, certain times. Again, the thalamus is how information or stimuli from the environment is dissipated to different parts of the brain. Basically, like where it's not going to hit the amygdala if we don't have the thalamus also working. Okay, these kind of work in conjunction. And then we have the cortex, and the cortex can't initiate a feeling like we're talking about. That comes from the amygdala. The cortex can initiate, but cannot create the anxiety response. So it can initiate it, but we can't feel it without the amygdala. A lot of the feeling part comes from the amygdala. So your cortex can say, X happened, so be anxious now, right? A tiger showed up, let's be anxious, right? And so even though you can't see it, it's not coming at you, the cortex would be like, there's a tiger out there. there's a tiger out there. It's going to get us. It's going to get us. There's a tiger out there. It's going to get us. And we get into some rumination or catastrophic thinking. That happens in the cortex. But the feeling of being anxious comes from the amygdala. Again, these things all work together. I think you're maybe starting to see how that works. Without the amygdala, the thalamus, and the cortex, we can't feel anything. We can't think about anything, right? And we can't send messages to different parts of the brain to do different things. So they're all very important in understanding how anxiety works for us. So we had to get that out of the way to understand how messages are sent, how information is received, and what happens physiologically. Okay, so now we're going to move into how we experience anxiety. This is from a neuroscience perspective. So this is how we experience anxiety in the brain. Neuro is basically another word for like neurology, and that's all like the brainstem systems functions in our body. Okay, so when we talk about neuroscience, we're talking about the brain, and how we experience anxiety from a brain perspective is in two ways: bottom up or top down. Okay, we're going to start with bottom up. Bottom up activation, how we experience anxiety. Okay, bottom up activation. There's a trigger for bottom up activation. So in the brain, being activated from the bottom up from a stimulus, a perceptual representation or a sensation in the environment, and that info gets sent to the amygdala. So this is like feeling something, smelling something, hearing something that triggers your physiological system and your brain, the amygdala specifically, to respond. It is taking what you smell, what you hear, and assessing it as safe or dangerous and firing super fast in the amygdala. The amygdala gets it first because we need to know if we're safe or not. Because if not, there's something the amygdala has to do in the brain and the body to get us to react right away. If we're safe, then it can kind of turn off and we don't need the amygdala anymore, and information can flow to the cortex, and then we can deal with it that way. But perceptual representations are things that we feel. It could be, if we give an example, I'll give an example from like PTSD and combat veterans. A bottom up activation for them can be the smell of diesel fuel, because diesel fuel is what they use in the military. So if they smell diesel fuel and start to get anxious or have a reaction, that is a bottom up activation. It is coming in through the senses. It is hitting the amygdala, and the amygdala saying danger, 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 because, mostly when they were smelling diesel, they're in a combat zone potentially, right? And so it makes sense. The amygdala learned that the smell of diesel means danger and we need to do something. Except now they're at their local gas station and, a big semi truck is getting diesel, and that's what they smell. It's not actually a dangerous situation, but your amygdala doesn't know the difference, and it's going to fire. Based on what it's learned. And so if it learned that diesel fuel equaled danger, when you smell diesel fuel, it is going to say danger and respond that way until we teach it and train it to do something different, which is what I'm going to talk about some. But understand that perceptual representation is a sensation. It's something coming in through the senses. It's not something we think about. It's something we feel. The stimulus runs directly from the thalamus to the amygdala. Again, that's how it gets sent and is evaluated as safe or unsafe. And then the anxiety response kicks in. This is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. This is your amygdala will respond in one of those ways to danger. And the info that the amygdala gets from the stimulus, which we need to know, is not very clear. It's very raw data. It's not refined. It's not explained. So understand that it's not like we smell the diesel and the amygdala is like, oh, we're at the gas station. We're not in the combat zone. Okay, we're fine. Your amygdala doesn't do that. And so it's just saying diesel fuel, that's all the information we have. It's very raw data. There's not a lot of context, but the amygdala gets the sensory, the stimulus, the stimulus from the environment, the information, sends it up to the brain. It hits the amygdala first, and the amygdala says safe or unsafe. All of this occurs before you can even think about smelling the diesel fuel or anything else that's triggering something. This is faster than when info passes through the cortex first. So sometimes info could go through the cortex first, which is our thinking, our word representation, our language part of things, and then go to the amygdala. Right. So this could be, okay, I smell diesel fuel, but I understand I'm at a gas station, I'm not in a combat zone. It goes to the amygdala. The amygdala doesn't fire because it's sending a different message, right? Often unexplained anxiety comes from the amygdala activations. So this is like, you don't realize that you smelled the diesel fuel, but your amygdala is going crazy, right? It is saying, run, there's a tiger. And you're like, what the hell is going on? I'm just at the gas station. Nothing is happening. Okay. Why do I feel so anxious, or why do I feel so upset or keyed up or dysregulated, right? So this comes from the amygdala getting like clicked on, and we don't know why. This can often lead to rumination, worry, compulsions, or avoidance because we can't explain the anxiety, but we feel really off. This is a bottom-up activation that can go into causing problems in the cortex with rumination and worry because we can't find a source for the anxiety or the anxious feeling that we're having. Okay, that's bottom up. If you have questions, let me know. If you have comments, chime in. You guys know that comments help boost views, ratings, all kinds of things for my podcast. So drop in your comments. Okay, now let's go into top-down activation. So this is a trigger or an activation in your nervous system from a thought you have. This is a high-level cognitive representation of the stimulus. So what we're talking about with bottom-up activation is a perceptual representation, what we perceive, what we feel. A top-down activation is a high-level cognitive representation of a stimulus, an association, what we think about something, what we have paired with it. And then that info gets sent to the amygdala. And the experience or the stimulus that we have from the environment then goes from the thalamus to the cortex to be processed, and then eventually to the amygdala, which produces an anxiety response, right? So it can go straight from like thought to amygdala, and it can go from thought to cortex to amygdala. Okay, so it can be either one. The bottom up activation is from a sensory experience in the world. A top-down activation is something that originates in the brain in the thought, but that doesn't mean that the thought goes through the cortex first in terms of processing. It can just go straight to the amygdala where it's saying safe or unsafe, right? With a belief or an association that we've made with something. I'm going to get to an example that will probably explain this in a little bit, but if you have questions, let me know. Okay, so then if it goes to the cortex to get processed and eventually to the amygdala, which produces the anxiety response. And like I was saying earlier, if it's passing through the cortex first, then the amygdala might respond differently. Like, okay, we recognize we're at the gas station and that's the diesel fuel, so we're okay. Or it won't be as intense. Like, we might still be on edge, but maybe we don't like get in the car and leave right away. Maybe we're just more on edge, but it's not as intense as a response from the amygdala. Different response could occur because when the information is received in the cortex and the cortex is involved, then thinking is involved. And this is where our beliefs, representations, and associations of things can lead to anxiety. The thought is the stimulus that triggers an anxiety response in a top down. The thought triggers anxiety. In a bottom up, the senses and the world around you trigger anxiety. Okay, so we're either going to bottom up is like feeling it and then it goes to the brain. Top down is like it originates in the brain and then we feel it. Kind of, again, very rudimentary explanation, but that's kind of how it works. Okay, let's get to some examples of an internal activation. So this is an activation of anxiety, formerly known as trigger. You guys have maybe heard like triggered, like a feeling is triggered, anxiety is triggered. We say activation now. I'm using them a little bit interchangeably so that people understand what I'm saying, but trauma informed says activation, not triggered. Okay, so an internal activation is this. When we're thinking about the brain, the interpretation of an event, AKA the cortex processed information equals the interpretation. So how your cortex has processed information is your interpretation of the information. And it's this interpretation of the information that causes the emotional reaction of anxiety, the meaning we've applied to something. Example. Okay, well, before I give that example, let me talk about external. So an internal activation, when we're talking about neuroscience on a brain perspective, is an interpretation of an event or or something that happens. And your interpretation is what causes the emotional reaction of anxiety, meaning we've associated these two things together. And when we see this thing or hear this thing or think this thought, like it kicks up anxiety because we've associated those things before, or your brain has anyways, even if it's not conscious. Okay, an external activation, when we're thinking about the brain, the event or the stimuli itself. So not our interpretation of the event, but the actual event itself is what causes the emotional reaction of anxiety. This means it originates in the sensations and the feelings part of the brain, which is the amygdala. I'm going to give an example of a fire truck parked on your street for both internal and external. Okay, for somebody who has anxiety that originates from an internal activation, so an interpretation of an event or a stimuli in the environment. So you are driving home from work and you are just turning on to the street where you live and you see a fire truck parked on your street. And your amygdala starts firing danger, 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 and you start feeling super anxious. Why? Why, when we just see it parked there, would that be the case? Because in your experience, a fire truck means a house fire. Let's say that, you or someone close to you had a house fire, and this is in your history, this is in your life experiences. So when you see a fire truck, for you, it says fire. There's not a fire truck there if there's not a fire. So fire truck equal fire equal danger and scary, and oh no, is my house on fire? Is my family safe? Okay, so you see the fire truck parked there. Your interpretation of the fire truck being parked there, meaning the fire truck is parked there because there is a fire. That's your interpretation of the stimulus of the fire truck being parked there. Your interpretation of that stimulus tells your brain danger, danger, danger. And that is based on past learning. That's why your amygdala is firing, but your association with the two and you making that association when you see the fire truck on the street is what kicks up the anxiety response. Okay. And let's be mindful that like fire truck's not doing anything. There's no fire. The fire truck is just parked there. But your interpretation of what a fire truck parked on a residential street means is that there's a fire that's dangerous and now you need to freak out. Okay. That's an internal activation. An external activation would be like seeing the lights or hearing the sounds on the fire truck parked on your street, let's say. And so same thing, right? You've experienced house fire before, somebody close to you. And so fire truck parked on residential street and you hear the sirens and you see the lights, that event itself, sirens and lights of the fire truck, is what creates the emotional reaction of anxiety. So this isn't like we've had time to think about the fire truck sitting there. This is like we experienced the fire truck sitting there in lights and sounds, and immediately amygdala is like danger, 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 there's a fire. Okay. And both of these scenarios, both of these examples, I did not say that there was an actual fire. All I said that there was a fire truck on the street, either doing this or doing that. But anxiety comes from learning So either an interpretation, in the cortex that we've learned, and or the amygdala is learned through experience that a fire truck equal danger. And that means your amygdala needs to be firing. It's doing what it's supposed to. It is learned that a fire truck equals something is on fire, that is dangerous, and we need it to fire. In this situation, it's not dangerous. Neither of these situations, whether you are triggered or activated from an internal thought about the fire truck or an external stimulus of hearing and seeing, parts of the fire truck, right, are creating the same emotional reaction, anxiety. And because of the association we made, and or because of the experience that the amygdala had before and learned then. However, this is not a scenario and where there's actually a fire, like the fire truck is parked on the street and has lights and sirens on because they're doing a community event for kids and teaching them about it, right? So your anxiety is going haywire. You might be in a panic attack. You might be in fight or flight mode because you saw or heard a fire truck when really the situation doesn't call for anxiety at all. There's none of that happening. There's not a house fire. There's a completely different reason the fire truck is here. But your learning and your brain is interpreting it differently, and it can be thinking about it or experience it from the environment, and either way can kick up anxiety. I hope that's clear. If it's not, please ask a question. So what this demonstrates is that cognitions, sensations, and behaviors can contribute to both perpetuating anxiety or reducing anxiety. Interventions will be tailored to which one activates a person anxiety, or both, if both things in certain contexts activate a person anxiety, an interpretation and or sensation from the environment. Okay, let me go into a little bit more here with the examples. The internal activation, when anxiety mostly originates from associations and interpretations of things, the cortex is the part of the brain that we're trying to change in intervention in psychotherapy treatment. And to do so, we used word-based interventions to change the meaning and interpretation of something. So in the example of the fire truck parked on the street, and your thought is like, well, there must be a fire somewhere. What we have to do is start changing that interpretation. Fire truck parked on the street does not necessarily mean fire. So what we would do when every time we see a fire truck is saying, hey, there's a fire truck and there's no fire. There's a fire truck and it's just parked. There's a fire truck and it's doing a community event. There's a fire truck and it's helping get a cat out of a tree, right? Like, we have to start saying these different things and creating a different interpretation around when we see a fire truck that's not just, oh, there's a fire. If we don't want our amygdala to be going off every time we see a fire truck based on our past experiences. Okay, so that's when there's a cortex basis for the anxiety. Then we used word-based interventions to change meaning interpretations. For an external activation, so when anxiety mostly originates from sensations and feelings activated from things or stimuli in the environment, the amygdala is the part of the brain that we're trying to change in interventions in psychotherapy treatment. And to do so, we use experience-based interventions to teach the amygdala to turn off when it's actually safe, right? So this is seeing the fire truck on the street, but there's not actually a fire. So we don't need the amygdala to be going, danger, 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 fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, do something right now. We actually have to teach the amygdala to turn off and to understand that every time it sees a fire truck doesn't mean we're in danger. Okay, so there's a way that we do that too. Cognitive behavioral therapy has both words and experience-based interventions. Cognitions and cognitive is the thinking part, behaviors, actions is that part. And so it's twofold. Neuroscience informed or neuroscience-based CBT is what I use in practice. That's this stuff combined with what we know about changing cognitions and changing behaviors to experience relief and lasting change. So neuroscience just refines this more for us over the years. CBT has been a gold standard for a long time. In some ways, we didn't know everything. It was good, but we've made some adjustments in what we know with neuroscience. So this neuroscience-informed use of CBT is more helpful today because it gives us more information about how to address brain changes or apply interventions to experience relief from anxiety, either using word or experience-based interventions. Good morning, Usman. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad to see that you've chimed in. Okay. Now let's talk about interventions and how this works. We're going to talk about cortex-based interventions first. This might make more sense to people as well. The cortex can create thoughts and images without any perceptions, without any environmental stimulus. Like, we don't need to see a fire truck to be able to create a picture or a thought about a fire truck, for example. Like, the cortex can think about things. This is one of the things that makes us human. This is one of the most developed parts of the brain. The fact that we can think, about our thinking is a very high level cognitive function that mammals and animals with brains of lower level cognitive function don't have. They can't think about their thinking. They can't think in future plan and things like that. So the cortex can create thoughts and images without any perceptions or stimulus from the environment. So we aren't dependent on the perceptual pathways, like feeling something. The cortex can perceive danger in the absence of feeling it, right? So this is how we just see the fire truck. We don't feel anything. We don't see anything. We don't feel heat from a fire. We don't hear sounds from the fire truck. We don't see lights from the fire truck. We don't smell smoke. So that's the absence of any stimuli from our senses, but we can perceive danger just by seeing the fire truck. That's the cortex thing. So we have to address that cortex misfire basically in our intervention. So the cortex interprets situations, and the interpretations often initiate unnecessary anxiety. In this case of the fire truck, it's a perfect example. The interpretation of the situation, which is the fire truck that's sitting on the street, is initiating unnecessary anxiety about danger of a house fire because there's not actually a house fire. So we're thinking about it, and it's creating this unnecessary anxiety response, anxiety feeling from our thinking about it. Okay. The cortex also anticipates situations, and the anticipation often creates unnecessary anxiety. Maybe you're driving and you see the fire truck driving, and so you anticipate that it's going to go to your street and to your house, and you start getting anxious about that. You start thinking about, oh shit, is there a fire at my house? Is there a fire at my house? Okay, it's anticipating something happening, which is kicking up anxiety. The cortex also produces images, sometimes in the form of intrusive thoughts or intrusive images that create unnecessary anxiety. Why did I think about that? Why did that just pop in there? Why am I concerned about a house fire now? Right? Like, so your cortex and your thinking can actually like produce anxiety in an unnecessary kind of way based on interpretations that we have of things in the absence of any sensory information coming in. The intervention for a cortex based brain change in terms of anxiety is cognitive restructuring. And this is modifying thinking process and tendencies. And this is what rewires the cortex, rewiring your brain to create a different interpretation so that, when you see a fire truck going down the street, you don't anticipate it's going to your house and then it kicks up all this anxiety. Okay, that's the idea. We have to change that. This helps folks replace anxiety-producing thoughts with coping thoughts. And this truly changes the brain. We know this in neuroscience. And what I mean by that is we know this via brain scans, fMRI scans, and other physiological body scans that we know that this rewires. So that eventually when we rewired this, the person sees a fire truck, the amygdala does not fire. That is how we know these things work. Okay, so it's not just information coming back from the client that, hey, I don't experience that anymore when I see a fire truck. It's that we tested this in a lab with an fMRI scan, and we see that their brain is not lighting up when the fire truck comes into view anymore, or when they think about it, right? Like their amygdala is not firing. This is what I like to call pretty rock solid evidence of something working, right? This is rock solid evidence of an intervention working. Now, I'm gonna say a little bit of something here. This might ruffle some feathers. We all know I'm no stranger to ruffling feathers. If you are not an educated and trained mental health provider, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a psych NP, a licensed professional counselor, licensed clinical social worker, licensed psychotherapist of any kind, You should never be attempting to do cognitive restructuring with anybody. If you do not have full knowledge of mental health and what happens in thinking and perception and behavior of people, you have no business going into their brain and like playing around with it. You don't really know what you're doing, no matter how much you've read about it, because applying this in real time to real people requires skill, requires education. I had lots of oversight, still do, to make sure that I'm not fucking people up. So if you do not have experience going into somebody's brain, kind of like a brain surgeon, then you have no business going into somebody's brain and trying to rewire it because they have anxiety about things. They need to be seeing a qualified and licensed mental health professional. That is my soapbox. I will stand by it. It is not just because I'm a mental health professional. It is because so much harm is coming from the wellness coaching industry with individuals who don't know what they're doing and they are not actually providing relief or treatment to people. And in a lot of cases, they are making things worse. Okay, moving on. Amygdala-based interventions. Remember, the amygdala is like the smoke detector, the relevance detector. And your personal experience influences the amygdala and how it fires. And therefore, what triggers or activates your anxiety responses to certain things is based on your experience as what your amygdala has learned already, right? So if you've had this example, if you had a bad experiences in a car, your amygdala remembers, even if your cortex doesn't, and creates fear responses to those stimuli. Cars, getting in a car, driving a car, right? Like you might start to experience the rapid heart rate, the fight or flight response, right? This is conditioning. You have been conditioned to be afraid of cars because of your experience with cars, right? The amygdala does not talk to you in thoughts and words. You feel this instead. This is a nervous system activation. This is what I talk about all the time in terms of trauma-informed care. This is true in anxiety too. And when your amygdala, fight, flight, response, part of the brain gets kicked on, you're not thinking about it. This is not intentional. This is a not premeditated, well thought out thing. It's not a thought out thing at all. This is you sense something, your brain reacts. Here we are trying to deal with a reaction, whatever that might be. Okay. So that is important to keep in mind. And your amygdala has also been conditioned based on your experiences. Think of somebody who's afraid of dogs. Did they have a bad experience with dogs? Were they bit by a dog when they were a kid? Did they, was a dog aggressive with them? Like, at some point, like that would be conditioning. The dogs are scary. I'm afraid of dogs. When I see a dog, danger, danger, danger goes off of my brain. That is not what happens when I see a dog, even a mean, scary dog. What goes off of my brain is like, all dogs are amazing. It wants to lick me in the face, even if it's a German Shepherd. And although I'm cautious and I know how to approach dogs, I will not be afraid of a dog. I have not had bad experiences with dogs. That doesn't make me better or worse than somebody else. It just means my experiences are different. There's nothing wrong with somebody who is afraid of dogs. We need to have respect and empathy for that person. Their experiences are real, and their brain and their body have learned that this is dangerous. And at some point, this was dangerous for them, and we need to respect that. This is like an example that people might say, oh yeah, that's fine. But I don't know how many times somebody's like, you're afraid of dogs? What's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with them. Something happened to them with the dogs. They had some sort of experience in their brain, amygdala, the primitive part that doesn't think, learned dogs are scary. I need to stay away from them to stay safe. That's normal. That's a self-protective thing. They've done great for themselves. There's nothing wrong with them. Please take this in, guys. Amygdala-based activations are not in our thinking. They're not in our conscious thought. And our amygdala is pre-programmed to develop some fears over others, and these help in our survival. Some of the common ones are heights, water, animals, crowds, lots of people looking at you. That can trigger an amygdala response, right? Fight, flight, freeze, the danger or safe, just based on, history, experience of people and how that has played out in lived experiences. And other fears present as a result of our experiences. So we're pre-programmed to be afraid of some things because it's good for our survival. It's part of how we've evolved over time. And then our own specific experiences also inform how our amygdala fires with certain stimuli or things happening in our environment. Okay, still on amygdala-based interventions. Some interventions have immediate effects on the activation of the amygdala, like deep breathing. This is one I've talked about before. Fun fact, guys, deep diaphragmatic breathing works faster than Xanax. That is fact. That is neuroscience information. That is, we had somebody at a high level of anxiety take a Xanax, and we watched their brain scan, and we watched when the cortisol dropped and when it came down, and when they felt calm. We're tracking their perspiration, their heart rate, their breath rate, right? All of those things. Give them a Xanax, look at how long it takes for the calming to actually enter their physiological body, their brain, turn off the cortisol. Then they do the same neuroscience experiment, looking at the brain scan while somebody's practicing deep diaphragmatic breathing, and they can see that it works faster at calming the brain. That's what I mean when I say I come from science, guys. I practice from science. This has been proven in an fMRI brain scan more times than we can count. Otherwise, it would not be an information that I can learn and apply to practice. It has already been studied empirically over and over and over again and proven. Okay, so deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, which means, the belly goes out when you breathe in and retracts when you breathe out. You take a big full breath. You try to breathe from your belly, not from your chest. That is what turns off the cortisol in your brain, which is getting pumped out when your amygdala is going danger, 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 and it will calm everything down. This is something you could use in that situation where, you smell the diesel, but are not in the situation where it's dangerous. We take some deep breaths, we calm that system, we turn the amygdala off. That is an intervention that has an immediate effect on the amygdala, the part of the brain. Some interventions work in a short-term way, changing the general level of activation for a period of time. So we can calm the amygdala for a period of time by having a regular movement exercise or yoga practice, walking, running, something like that. We can also generally change the level of activation, or how fast it fires or how intense it fires when we've had adequate sleep. These are some amygdala-based interventions, movement, breathing, sleep, that help calm the amygdala, and we're training it to do something different and not to fire in these non-dangerous situations that the amygdala thinks is actually dangerous. Okay, and then some interventions rewire the circuitry in the amygdala, producing lasting change. This is the rewiring of the brain part, like exposure. Exposure therapy is often used in phobias, OCD, things like that. And so we must activate the amygdala to generate new connections or pairings. So we actually have to get it to kick on in its danger space. So we have to expose it to the thing it fears and that it thinks it's dangerous to be able to change that response. So this is what exposure is. You have to expose somebody to the thing that they're afraid of, expose their amygdala to the thing they're afraid of. Let's go with spiders for a phobia. So you have to expose them to a spider, let their amygdala start to go off, and then teach them how to deep breathe and withstand the anxiety to promote new learning. This is changing the brain so that when we see a spider and we've gotten to the place we can turn the amygdala off, eventually the amygdala is not going to fire when we just see a spider, right? This is how exposure works in treatment. And again, if you're not trained to do this, do not think that you can do this, especially to do exposure treatment in sort of these intense cases requires a lot of training, guys, to do it well. I'm talking about this as if it's easy to understand. This is not easy to practice with real human beings who are struggling and dysregulated. Okay, so talking about it in an educational space is one thing. Actually doing it is something completely different. Let me say this is a word about symptoms that come with anxiety. Catastrophic thinking, negative and extreme thoughts about potential outcomes, that's catastrophic thinking, can be intrusive, they just pop in, oh shit, that means there's a fire happening, right? And that's bad, and my whole house is burned down, right? That's catastrophic thinking. It can be intrusive, just pop in there and then perpetuate it, meaning we focus on it. And a way that we shift the catastrophic thinking is to change the channel. And this is a cortex intervention. So instead of focusing on, oh no, oh shit, there's a fire, we have to redirect the thoughts to something else. That's a cortex intervention. And it is helpful for catastrophic thinking that often causes anxiety. Rumination, which can occur for either anxiety or depression, is often the result of amygdala activation, like I was saying earlier. It's sensing something in your environment, not really placing what it is, and then starting to feel anxious. We feel anxious, but we don't know why. So we start to think about why we might be anxious, obsessively think about why we might be anxious. And actually, the worrying distracts you from anxiety, from feeling anxious in your body. So when we're up here in our head, it often moves us out of the feeling in our body. Worry is actually used to move us away from the uncomfortable feeling in the body. Does it end anxiety? No, it just perpetuates it, but it's now perpetuating it in the mind, and it's distracting us from feeling it in the body. Is it making it go away in the body? No, it's actually ramping it up. We're just not paying attention to that. We're paying attention to the thoughts. So this can come from an amygdala-based intervention and addressing that, and that can reduce the rumination. Compulsions are also used to reduce anxiety or those uncomfortable feelings. Engaging in compulsive behavior leads to feeling less anxious physically in your system, in your body. This is why people will compulsively confess, wash their hands, count numbers, some of those things, because doing those things helps reduce the anxiety that they feel. That's how they get paired together, right? An exposure intervention for OCD and compulsive behaviors would be somebody feeling the anxiety and not engaging in the compulsive behavior to ease the anxiety. They have to do something else or not do anything at all, and kind of sit with it. It's very difficult work, guys. And then avoidance. So if we're talking about catastrophic thinking, rumination, compulsions or compulsive behaviors, and avoidance as symptoms of anxiety, and they most certainly are. And avoidance is refusing to do something that creates that anxious feeling. And that obviously leads to feeling less anxious. But we know for the brain, the more you avoid, the more the anxiety grows. And it just, the next time you encounter that thing, it's like, oh yeah, big and scary. We have to avoid it again. So this just creates a pattern of avoiding something instead of actually dealing with it, instead of actually changing the brain so that it doesn't want to avoid this thing anymore because it's not actually afraid of this thing anymore. Hope that makes sense. All right, that wraps up our content. How can I help you with understanding and reducing anxiety? On my website, www.sarahobrienlcsw.com. I have some freebies, some free resources for you for anxiety in particular. I have a free handout on natural remedies for anxiety. So things that are not medications, not prescribed medications, other things you can use and do to reduce anxiety or cope with it in the moment. And also a mindfulness exercises ebook. This will help you be able to focus more on your body and your thinking, be able to sort of piece things out and pay more attention to yourself, to recognize when those signals are going off and when you need to use a coping thought or a coping strategy. So go to my website, go under free resources. You can download those right now. There's nothing you need to do, and you don't even need to sign up for anything. Just go download those. I also have a workbook, one of my compassionate self kits, dealing with negative thinking workbook. This is really going to help with those rumination, catastrophic, negative thoughts that often come with anxiety. That's only $19. It's a digital download. You'll get it directly to your inbox. And then another workbook in my compassionate self kits section is reconnect with your inner knowing or your intuition. So this is learning to be able to listen to yourself and trust yourself. And this helps with sort of reducing that amygdala activation for those sensations that you feel that we don't know where they come from, and then we just get anxious. It's starting to learn to trust yourself and understand how you feel. That one's only $9, again, digital download. If you just want to understand more about this, we can do coaching. If you need to heal and address and get mental health treatment for this, I can only be your therapist if you're located in Virginia or Maryland. Those are the states where I am licensed. If you want your staff, your business, your team to understand more about this, you can contact me for consulting. I can come in, train, educate, do a webinar for your team to understand some of these things. Okay, I got a little bit organized, guys. We got some new slides here. You're welcome. Let me give you the schedule for July. There will be no show at 11 a.m. next week because I will be in New York City. But stay tuned between 12 and 2 p.m. as I will be going live and have something special for you guys. But there's no official Healing Hour podcast episode next week. There is also no official Healing Hour podcast episode the following week on the 17th of July because I will be self-caring at a doctor appointment and a massage. I have this doctor's appointment every 3 months. It's a difficult one for me. I go get a massage every 3 months after this appointment, and Thursday happens to be when it is. So no show that day. I'll be doing some self-care. But like I said, for this one, come back on the 24th and the 31st. I'm still talking about neuroscience and from the specialties in which I treat in my psychotherapy practice, which include addiction that I'll be talking about on July 24th and the neuroscience of trauma that I'll be talking about on July 31st. Stay tuned for August. I am hoping to have some more guests back on in August. I know you guys like that. So that will be coming. Theme to be determined, but guests probably coming. Who am I? I'm a licensed psychotherapist, like I said, licensed clinical social worker in Virginia and Maryland. I'm a trauma-informed subject matter consultant and leadership strategist. And I am a trauma-informed coach and consultant, director of student wellness of Transformation Kitchen HR for You. Shout out to my buddy Jason and all the cool stuff he's been doing in Nicaragua this month. It's such an honor and pleasure to use my skills and work with his students. Like I said, I'm a speaker and trainer. So a webinar, podcast guest, come in to talk to your hospital system, your classroom, your whomever, give me a call. I'm also a consultant for private practice therapists. If you want to start up your private practice, if you have questions, you can contact me for that. Okay. Things that I don't normally talk about on here, but I feel like I need to say, I have a merch shop. So these are original designs. I design things for fun in Canva usually. This is my outlet, but these are affirmations and like mental health and self-care sort of themed things like self-care is badass, like those types of things and sayings. I have them, you can get them on stickers, notebooks, hats, t-shirts, hoodies, and more. Scan that QR code to get to my merch shop. It is online, purchase whatever you want, get something for a friend. They often run specials and deals, so check that out. Grab that QR code. You can also find links to all these things in my merch shop on my website. Okay, now I said I was going to be talking about this because of Independence Day. So let me just say, I celebrate Independence Day maybe differently than others because on all of these holidays, I don't forget how we got here and all the lives that sacrificed for our freedom. So the goofy face in this picture is my older brother. He was killed in the Iraq War almost 20 years ago when he was 22 years old and a medic in the U.S. Army. I love this picture of him. This really pretty much sums up who he is, even though he's wearing the uniform. He's always joking and like poking fun at things and being extra and like funny and like center of attention. And so this picture is a quintessential Adam Fargo. And maybe don't forget that freedom isn't free. It cost this life and a bunch of other heartache in my family. And we are just one soldier and one soldier's family. The ripple effect of all of the sacrificed lives for our freedom, starting from the very beginning, is immense. And if you can just take a minute this holiday weekend, a moment of silence, a cheers, a toke, a whatever, a word about the individuals in our armed forces that fight and die if necessary to protect our freedoms. This face is one of them, and he is very near and dear to me. So don't forget that freedom isn't free this Independence Day. Take care of yourselves. And I would just love it if you could take a little moment of silence or say a special word when you are with your people about what the day is for. I thank you everyone for joining me this morning. Leanna, Rashida, Andrew, Usman. I appreciate you chiming in with your comments. Today we talked about neuroscience and anxiety. Join me for my next show on July 24th. Neuroscience and addiction or substance uses. Thank you to Andrew Stout and the Let's Be Diverse podcast for sponsoring the Healing Hour. Please don't ever forget that you matter, you are worthy, whatever you're going through. There's nothing wrong with you. It's likely something that happened to you. And I'm sure that you just need love and care. And I wish that for you and hope that I'm extending some of that to you through this healing hour and through my information and experience and also like being a fellow who's trying to make it in this world and has my own shit to deal with and struggle with feeling like I matter and I am worthy. Know that it comes from me to you, trauma-informed love and trauma-informed care. I hope you guys enjoy your long holiday weekend. I appreciate you for supporting me and the work that I do and this information and trying to get the message of healing to as many as possible. Please follow me and subscribe on YouTube/@timelesstherapist is where you can catch all the Healing Hour episodes. Please go and subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. It's helpful for me. Go to my merch shop. Enjoy your weekend. I'll catch you guys back here in a couple of weeks. Let me see if I can get this off so you guys can see my face. There we are. All right, guys. I'll see you again on the 24th for another episode of the Healing Hour. And stay tuned next week on Thursday, July 10th for a special live in New York City. Thank you again. And I look forward to healing with you, learning with you, and being together. Have a great day.